Keanu Reeves walked quietly down a busy street in Los Angeles, wearing an old jacket and boots that had seen many miles. His jeans were faded, and his black t-shirt looked plain. His hair was a bit messy, and there was no sign of a bodyguard or assistant nearby. He looked like just another quiet man walking alone. But that man was one of the most loved actors in the world. He passed expensive shops with glass windows and shiny lights. People around him were dressed in designer clothes, taking pictures and shopping without worry. Keanu didn't seem to care about any of that. He stopped outside a fancy clothing store and looked at the display. Inside were elegant suits, leather jackets, gold watches, and handmade shoes. It was the kind of store only rich people usually entered. But Keanu pushed the door open and walked in slowly. The shop smelled of perfume and fresh leather. Soft music played in the background. Everything was clean, polished, and shining under soft lights. Two saleswomen stood behind the counter, chatting quietly while sipping coffee. One of them looked up and saw Keanu enter. Her eyes quickly went from his worn shoes to his old jacket. Then she whispered something to the other woman, and both of them started giggling. Keanu didn't notice, or maybe just didn't react. He walked over to a dark brown leather coat hanging on the side wall. It had golden buttons and a smooth finish. He gently ran his fingers across the material, admiring the quality. "Excuse me," he asked softly. "Do you have this in a larger size?" The first saleswoman rolled her eyes. She leaned toward her friend and said with a smile, "He thinks he's going to buy that?" They both laughed quietly again. Then she turned to Keanu and said, "Sorry, that coat is very expensive, sir. Maybe you'd like to try something more affordable." Her tone was sweet on the surface, but it carried disrespect. Keanu gave a small smile and nodded. "No problem," he said, still calm. He turned and walked to another section of the store, looking at belts and watches on a nearby shelf. A small crowd of other shoppers moved past him. Ignoring who he was, everyone in that store was dressed for style, except for him. Behind him, the sales staff kept whispering. One of them said loud enough to hear, "Some people just walk in to feel rich for a few minutes." Keanu heard that line, but he didn't say anything. He didn't look angry. He didn't walk out. He simply continued looking at items, treating each piece with quiet interest. He held a silver watch in his hand, checked its weight, and then carefully put it back in its place. A few steps away, a young woman shopping with her mother suddenly stopped. She squinted at Keanu, then gasped quietly. She leaned to her mom and whispered something in her ear. "That's Keanu Reeves," she said. Her mother looked shocked and glanced at him again. Then they both stood frozen, unsure what to do. Slowly, more people in the store started to notice. Some shoppers began to look closer, pulling out their phones. A couple of people took quiet photos from the side. But the sales staff still didn't seem to believe it was really him. One of them said, "Nah, Keanu Reeves doesn't dress like that," and turned away. Another replied, "Why would a millionaire shop alone with no one to carry his bags?" While they joked, a small red light blinked in the corner of the ceiling. A security camera had been capturing the entire moment. Upstairs in the manager's office, a man reviewing the camera feed suddenly stood up straight. He paused the video, zoomed in, and his face turned pale. Without a word, he grabbed his earpiece and rushed down the stairs as fast as he could, back on the floor. Keanu had just picked up a custom belt made of dark fabric and metal studs. He turned it in his hand, reading the tag quietly around him. Whispers grew louder as more people began to recognize him. Some even started following him around like quiet shadows, keeping their distance, afraid to disturb him, but curious to watch what he'd do. The saleswomen behind the counter still stood with folded arms, watching with a smile that said they still didn't believe it. "If that's Keanu Reeves, I'm a space princess," one joked. Keanu glanced toward her but said nothing. He had heard the whole thing, but he still remained polite. His calm eyes scanned the items with respect, like every piece mattered. Then, in the middle of the quiet tension, footsteps came down fast from the stairs. The boutique's manager appeared, breathing heavily and headed straight toward Keanu. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. The moment had changed, and no one yet understood what was about to happen. The manager came running down the stairs, his shoes tapping loudly on the wooden steps. He had never moved so fast inside the store before. His heart was racing, not from the run, but from the shock he just had. When he reached the ground floor, he looked around quickly, his eyes locked onto the man standing quietly by the belts, Keanu Reeves. Keanu turned slightly when he heard the manager approach. He gave a small, polite smile, just like he would to anyone else. The manager almost tripped as he hurried over. He was sweating now, not from heat but from worry. "Mr. Reeves," he said breathlessly, "I am so sorry, we didn't recognize you." The two saleswomen standing behind the counter froze like statues. One of them dropped her coffee cup, which spilled slowly over the counter. They looked at each other with wide eyes. Their faces turned pale as the truth hit them hard. This really was Keanu Reeves. The man they had mocked, laughed at, and ignored was not just anyone. He was one of the most respected stars in the world. Keanu simply nodded and said, "It's okay, I was just looking." His voice was calm and gentle, not angry, not hurt, just quiet. That made the moment even more powerful. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't demanding anything. He was just being himself. The manager tried to fix the situation quickly. He offered help, apologized again, and asked if Keanu needed assistance finding something. Keanu shook his head softly. "I just wanted to look, that's all," he said. Then he turned back to the shelves as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. The other customers had now fully realized what was going on. They began whispering to each other, "That's Keanu Reeves. He came in alone." They laughed at him. Can you believe it? Phones were being pulled out quietly. Some people tried to take pictures without being noticed. Others just stood and watched, unsure if they were witnessing a movie scene or real life. The saleswomen stood still, faces burning with embarrassment. One of them whispered, "I can't believe we just laughed at him." Her friend didn't respond. She was too stunned to speak. Both of them had treated him badly just minutes ago, assuming he was poor just because of how he looked. Now they were watching their mistake turn into a storm. A man in a suit stepped forward, one of the store's regular wealthy customers. He nodded respectfully toward Keanu and said, "It's an honor to see you here, sir." Keanu simply returned the nod, still saying little. His silence spoke louder than anything else. He wasn't angry, but he had clearly heard everything. The quiet way he handled it was making people feel even more ashamed. The manager tried again. "Would you allow me to show you our new arrivals, Mr. Reeves? You're welcome to take a private viewing room if you'd prefer." Keanu smiled again. "No, thank you. I just wanted to browse. I like to look on my own," he replied. Then walked slowly to another rack of coats. Now the entire atmosphere of the store had changed. The employees were no longer laughing. They were scared. The other customers weren't shopping anymore. They were watching him. Some were shaking their heads at how the staff had treated him earlier. One older woman whispered, "This is why you should treat everyone with kindness." One of the saleswomen finally walked toward him, trying to fix things. "Sir, I'm very sorry for what I said earlier," she began nervously. Her voice shook. Keanu looked at her gently. "Don't worry," he said. "It's important to be kind to everyone, not just the ones who look rich." That sentence hit hard. Everyone around heard it, and it echoed in their minds. The girl nodded slowly, holding back tears. She had learned a lesson the hard way. A painful but unforgettable one. Keanu picked up a long black coat next. He turned it in his hands and looked at the stitching. He didn't ask for help or attention. He just wanted to enjoy the moment like any regular person. But now every step he took was being watched. The quiet man in simple clothes had suddenly become the center of the room. Customers whispered things like, "He's so humble." "Imagine being rich and still so polite." "I would have shouted if I were him." But Keanu didn't need to raise his voice. He had already made his point without saying much at all. As he walked slowly toward the front of the store, a little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Is that John Wick?" he asked with big eyes. His mother smiled and whispered, "Yes, sweetheart. And he's even cooler in real life." Keanu gave a small wave to the boy and smiled, making the child beam with joy. The store had never felt like this before. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about respect, humility, and grace. Everyone was still stunned. But something even more surprising was still about to happen. Keanu wasn't done yet, and what he did next would leave the entire store speechless. Keanu stood near the front of the store, still calm, still quiet. The energy in the room had shifted completely. People who once ignored him now watched him with wide eyes. The sales staff who had laughed now stayed silent, afraid to speak, afraid to move. They didn't know what he was going to do next. The manager stood nervously to the side, hoping to fix the situation, hoping Keanu wouldn't complain to the media, but Keanu had no interest in that. He didn't want revenge. He wasn't there to embarrass anyone. He had only come in to look at some clothes, yet now he had everyone's full attention. Keanu looked over at the counter where the two saleswomen stood. His eyes were kind, but steady. He slowly walked toward them. The manager followed behind him like a shadow, holding his breath. The saleswomen looked down, their hands shaking a little. One of them stepped back as he stopped in front of them. "May I ask your name?" Keanu said gently to the one who had laughed the loudest earlier. She looked up slowly, her face pale. My name is Clara," she whispered. Keanu nodded. "Thank you, Clara," he said softly. "I don't want anything from you, just remember, the way you treat people matters." Clara felt her chest tighten, her eyes filled with tears. She didn't expect kindness after what she had done. She nodded slowly, unable to speak. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. Keanu gave a small smile, then turned toward the cashier's counter. Everyone in the store watched him as he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black credit card. The kind of card only the super rich carried. He placed it on the counter, then pointed to the expensive coat he had touched earlier. "I'll take the leather coat," he said calmly. "Also the silver watch, the belt, and that pair of shoes." By the mirror, the room fell even more silent. He had just named the most expensive items in the store. The total was going to be several $1,000s. One of the customers whispered, "He's actually buying them, even after all that." The cashier looked shocked, but quickly began scanning the items. She moved carefully. Trying not to make a mistake, Keanu stood patiently, saying nothing more. He didn't brag, didn't smirk, didn't make any comments. He simply waited while the cashier totaled everything. The screen showed the final price, over $18,000. Without blinking, Keanu nodded. "That's fine," he said, then gently tapped the card. The payment went through instantly. The manager let out a quiet breath of relief, but he still looked nervous. Then Keanu reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small folded piece of paper. He opened it, scribbled something, and handed it to the cashier. It was a note with a number and a $1,000 tip written on the side. He smiled and said, "Please share this with your team, and next time, be kind to everyone, no matter how they dress." The cashier looked stunned. "Thank you, sir," she whispered. Keanu gave a small nod and picked up the shopping bag with his new items. Then he turned and began walking toward the door again. The room remained frozen. No one moved, no one spoke. But just before he reached the door, Keanu turned around. His voice still soft, but now a little stronger. "Clara," he said, calling the saleswoman gently by her name again. She looked up quickly. "Yes?" she said, her voice barely a whisper. Keanu said, "It's easy to treat rich people well, but the real test is how you treat someone when you think they have nothing." The words hit everyone like thunder. A customer near the back whispered, "That's deep," another nodded and said, "He's teaching without shouting." Clara looked like she wanted to cry, but held it in. She nodded quickly. "I understand now," she said. Keanu smiled. then pushed open the glass door and stepped back into the sunlight. Just like that, he was gone. No cameras, no interviews, no spotlight, just silence behind him. The people in the store stayed still for a long time, thinking about what had just happened. Then one man said aloud, he could have yelled at them. He could have humiliated them, but instead, he taught them something they'll never forget. The rest of the store agreed. The lesson wasn't in what Keanu bought. It was in how he carried himself, how he turned disrespect into a quiet moment of truth. And even though Keanu had left, his presence still filled the room, like a quiet storm had passed through, gentle but powerful. Everyone, staff and customers alike, walked away from that day, changed forever. After Keanu left the store, silence stayed behind. The fancy music kept playing in the background, but no one paid attention to it anymore. People were still standing where they had been, like they were frozen in thought. The cashier was staring at the $1,000 tip in her hand, her fingers trembling. Clara and the other saleswoman sat down behind the counter slowly, still trying to understand what had just happened. Clara couldn't stop thinking about his words. The real test is how you treat someone when you think they have nothing. Those words were stuck in her mind, louder than any shout could have been. She felt something deep inside her shift, something she had ignored for years. The customers slowly began to talk. He didn't have to say anything, said a woman holding a purse. But he still chose to be kind, another man nodded. He taught a lesson with class, not anger. Some people walked out quietly, carrying more than their shopping bags. They carried the memory of that moment in their hearts. Meanwhile, Keanu walked calmly down the street, blending once again into the crowd. He didn't rush, didn't act proud. He simply walked like any regular man who had just finished shopping. A few people walking past him didn't even recognize him, but those who did were too stunned to approach him. Some just whispered to each other, "That's him. That's Keanu Reeves." He reached a bench near a quiet street corner and sat down. Placing the shopping bag beside him, he took a sip from a small water bottle he had in his pocket. For a few minutes, he just watched the world go by, cars passing, people laughing, life moving forward. His face was calm, but inside his mind, he was thinking he didn't enjoy being treated like a celebrity. That wasn't what he had come into the store for. He didn't want fame. He wanted people to understand something more important, how to treat others with kindness. It wasn't about money or clothes. It was about respect. And today, that store had needed a reminder back in the boutique. The manager was walking in circles. He was embarrassed and frustrated. Not at Keanu, but at himself and his staff. We could have treated him with dignity from the start, he whispered to himself. Then he walked to the counter where Clara still sat, lost in thought. "We need to change things here," the manager said. "This can't happen again." Clara nodded, her eyes red from holding back tears. "He didn't yell at me," she whispered. "He didn't even want to embarrass me. He just wanted me to understand." The manager sighed. "That's the kind of man he is." A few hours later, Clara walked out of the store and sat on the same bench where Keanu had sat earlier. She didn't know it was the same one, but somehow it felt right. She looked at her reflection in a shop window nearby. She didn't like what she saw, not her appearance, but her attitude, her behavior, the way she judged someone by how they looked. She thought about her own struggles, how she once couldn't afford rent, how she had worn second-hand clothes growing up, and yet, today, she had mocked someone who walked in looking simple. Why had she done that? Had the fancy lights and rich customers made her forget who she was? At that moment, a little girl walked by with her father. The girl dropped her ice cream by accident and began to cry. Clara stood up without thinking, walked over, and gave the girl a napkin from her purse. "It's okay, sweetheart," she said with a warm smile. "You'll get another one," the father thanked her. And Clara felt something new inside her, a soft feeling, like a light turning on. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel fake. She didn't feel like she was just pretending to smile. The smile was real, That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She kept remembering Keanu's eyes, calm but full of meaning. She opened her laptop and searched his name. She found stories about him giving up his seat on the subway, buying meals for strangers, quietly donating millions to hospitals. He had been doing these things for years, without asking for attention. That made her cry for real this time. I judged him, she whispered to herself, and he still chose to teach me with kindness. She closed her eyes and promised herself she would be different. From now on, she would look at people, not their clothes, not their shoes, but their hearts, just like he had looked at her with kindness, even when she didn't deserve it. And while the world kept spinning, a quiet man had once again left a deep mark, without shouting, without fame, just by being good. The next morning, the story began to spread like fire across the internet. A blurry photo of Keanu Reeves holding a shopping bag was shared on social media with a short caption. They laughed at him in a fancy store, then he taught them a lesson with silence. At first, only a few people reacted, but by afternoon, thousands had seen it, and the numbers kept growing. People shared the story across every platform: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Everyone had something to say. Some were shocked, others were inspired. Many simply wrote, "Classic Keanu," or "That's why we love this man." Even those who didn't usually follow celebrity news were now talking about it. The post included details: how the staff had laughed at him, how he had stayed calm, how he had bought the expensive items without showing off, and most importantly, how he had tipped the store with $1,000 and left them a message of kindness. These details made people stop scrolling and think, what would I have done in that situation? One comment read, "He didn't fight hate with hate, he used grace." Another said, "True wealth is not in the wallet, it's in the heart." And the likes, shares, and comments kept growing. Within hours, news websites began to pick up the story. Headlines appeared like, "Keanu teaches fashion store humility," "Silence louder than words, Reeves does it again," and "Kindness over ego." Keanu's viral moment. Back at the boutique, everything felt different. The store manager sat in his office, watching the news spread. His stomach turned with guilt as the world now knew what had happened inside his store. He didn't care about bad reviews or customer complaints anymore. He cared about how they had failed as human beings. He called a meeting with all his staff, including Clara and the cashier who took the payment. Everyone stood quietly. In the center of the store, the mood was serious. "We made a big mistake," the manager said. "And the world has seen it." Nobody spoke, not even Clara, who had tears in her eyes again. The manager continued, "But what hurts me most is not that the story is viral, it's that we had to be taught this lesson by a man who didn't owe us anything." The staff nodded, feeling the truth of those words. "From this day forward, I want to change the way we treat people," he added. "Every customer, rich or poor, must be treated with respect always." Later that evening, Clara sat at her desk in her tiny apartment. She had just finished reading hundreds of online comments about the incident. People had written everything, from support to disappointment. Some were angry at how she had acted, some forgave her. Others shared their own stories of being judged by their appearance. Then Clara saw something she never expected her own name in a shared message from a stranger. A customer from that day had written a post saying, "The woman who made fun of him looked broken after what he said. I saw her eyes, he didn't just teach her, he changed her." Clara cried again. But this time, not from shame, from hope. That night, she wrote a letter. She didn't send it anywhere, not yet, but she needed to write it. It was a letter to Keanu. Even though she didn't know where to send it, she just wanted to say thank you in the letter. She wrote, "Dear Mr. Reeves, you came into our store, and I treated you unfairly. I judged you, not knowing who you were, but that's not the point. Even if you had been a stranger with no fame or fortune, you still deserved better. You showed me grace when I gave you none. You reminded me of the kind of person I used to be. Before this job made me cold. You didn't yell, you didn't shame me. But you changed me more than anyone ever has. From now on, I will carry your words with me every day. I am sorry, and I thank you, from the bottom of my heart." She folded the letter and placed it in a small notebook, hoping that somehow it might reach him. Or maybe she'd just keep it as a reminder of the day her heart woke up again. Meanwhile, Keanu remained quiet. He didn't post about what happened. He didn't give interviews or make any public comment. He simply continued with his life, living simply, helping quietly, and walking through the world with the same quiet grace. But his silence was louder than any speech. The world was watching. And people were learning, not just about how to treat celebrities, but how to treat everyone. And in that fancy little store, tucked inside a busy city, one moment had changed everything, not with fame, not with power, but with pure, simple kindness. By the next day, the video clip from the store had already reached millions of people. It had no loud music, no dramatic effects, just a few seconds showing Keanu Reeves standing quietly at the counter, buying the items the staff once told him he couldn't afford. His soft voice could barely be heard, but the impact was strong. He didn't raise his voice. But still, the whole world listened. News reporters began to call the store. Bloggers wanted interviews. Even TV shows talked about what had happened. The store manager refused to speak to anyone. He didn't want fame or attention. He wanted to focus on fixing what had gone wrong. He told his staff, "No comments, no drama. Let's focus on learning." Meanwhile, Clara was getting messages from strangers. Some were kind, some were angry. Some people forgave her, while others reminded her of her mistake. She read every message, even the ones that hurt, because she knew she had to face the truth. She had judged someone by their appearance, and now the whole world had seen it. At the same time, something beautiful was happening. People began to share their own stories. A woman wrote about the time she was ignored in a bookstore because of her worn-out clothes. A man posted how a stranger helped him when he was homeless and treated like garbage. One teenager shared that her father always said, "Kindness costs nothing, but gives everything." These stories created a wave of emotion online. More people began to look inward, asking themselves, "Have I done the same thing?" Some admitted their past mistakes. Others promised to treat people better from that day forward. All because one man, without yelling, without blaming, had shown what true kindness looked like. The store's owner, who lived in another state, finally saw the video. He called the manager and said, "You've got something special there, not just a customer, but a wake-up call." The owner then made a public post on the boutique's official page. It read, "We sincerely apologize to Mr. Keanu Reeves for the disrespect shown by some of our staff. We also thank him for the lesson he gave not only to our team, but to the world. We are taking this moment to reflect, learn, and grow. From this day, every single staff member will go through kindness and empathy training. Because in our store, every human deserves dignity, no matter how they look or what they wear." Post went viral again, but this time with praise. People said, "Finally, a company that admits its mistake and wants to grow." Others wrote, "It's not too late to change, still." The most liked comment under that post simply said, "All this because one man stayed kind when he could have been cruel." Somewhere far from all the noise, Keanu was sitting on a park bench, wearing a cap and sunglasses, reading a small book. He had no idea his quiet moment had reached so many hearts. Or maybe he did, but he didn't care about being noticed. He never did it for fame. He just believed in doing what was right. A young man walked past him, then stopped. He turned back and said, "Excuse me, are you Keanu Reeves?" Keanu looked up, smiled gently, and nodded. "Yes," he said quietly. The young man sat beside him and said, "What you did at that store, it meant a lot to my mom. She cried when she saw the video." Keanu nodded slowly and said, "Tell her I'm glad she felt something. That means it mattered." The young man smiled, then added, "You didn't shout, you didn't fight, you just stood there, like peace itself." Keanu gave a small smile and said, Sometimes peace is the strongest voice in the room. The young man left with tears in his eyes, and Keanu went back to reading his book. Somewhere deep in his heart, he knew that something special had happened, not because of the cameras or headlines, but because the world had paused, even for a little while, to listen to what silence could teach. Back at the boutique, something else had changed too. New customers walked in, not just to shop, but to meet the staff who had learned something real. A woman walked up to Clara and said, "You made a mistake, but you owned it. That matters to people." Clara smiled softly and said, "I'm still learning, every day." The boutique had become more than just a place for rich people to shop. It had become a symbol of growth, change, and second chances, all because a man walked in without trying to prove anything, and walked out having proved everything that truly mattered. Days passed since the incident in the boutique, but the story did not fade away. Instead, it grew stronger and touched more hearts around the world. People continued to talk about the quiet strength of the man who taught kindness without anger, Keanu Reeves. Meanwhile, Clara, the saleswoman who had mocked him, was going through a deep change inside. She woke up each morning thinking about that day, about the look in Keanu's eyes, calm, kind, but full of meaning. She felt shame for how she had treated him, but also hope, because she knew she could do better. Clara wanted to be different, but she didn't know how at first. One afternoon, Clara received a message on her phone from an unknown number. It was from a woman who had seen the story online. She wrote, "I was there that day too. I saw how Keanu treated you with respect, even when you didn't deserve it. You have a chance to be better. Please don't waste it." The message touched Clara deeply. That night, Clara sat by her small window and thought about her life. How had she become so quick to judge? She remembered her childhood, when she had worn old shoes and patched clothes, when people looked down on her and made fun. She realized that now, she had become what she once hated, someone who judged others for how they looked. She wanted to change, but change felt difficult. She didn't know where to start. Then she thought about Keanu, how he didn't yell or embarrass anyone, how he showed kindness quietly and strongly. That was the kind of person Clara wanted to be. The next day at work, Clara arrived early, her heart pounding with nervousness. She called a meeting with the other staff. "I want to say sorry," she began. "I was wrong to laugh at a customer because of his clothes. I judged him unfairly. But I want to learn from that moment, and I want us all to be better." The other employees listened carefully, some nodding in agreement. Clara suggested they start a new tradition in the store, a weekly meeting where they would talk about kindness, respect, and understanding. They would share stories about times they felt judged or left out, and how it made them feel. The manager loved the idea and promised to support them fully. Word spread that Clara had changed, and people who once avoided the store began to return. They saw a new kindness in the employees, a warmth that had not been there before. One customer said, "You can feel the difference when you walk in now. It's not just about clothes anymore, it's about how people treat each other." Clara also began volunteering at a local shelter, helping people who struggled like she once did. She found joy in listening to others' stories and offering kindness without judgment. Every time she felt the old habits creeping back, she remembered Keanu's calm eyes and the lesson he gave her. Meanwhile, the boutique became known not just for expensive clothes, but for its kindness. Many customers returned to support the store, not just to buy, but to be part of something good. The manager worked hard to improve the training and make sure every employee understood the power of respect. The story of Keanu's quiet grace had become a symbol proof that one small moment of kindness could change many lives. Even people who never met Keanu personally felt inspired to be better, to treat others with respect, no matter who they were. One day, Clara stood near the entrance of the store when a small girl and her mother walked in. The girl looked at Clara with big eyes and said softly, "You're the lady who said sorry, right?" Clara smiled and nodded. "Yes, that's me," she said gently. The girl smiled back, then hugged her tightly. "Thank you for being kind now," she whispered. Clara felt tears in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of happiness. She realized that true change was possible, that the kindness Keanu had shown her was now flowing through her to others, and that made all the difference in the world. Far away, Keanu kept living quietly, unaware of the full impact of his simple act. But the world had changed because of him. One person's grace had sparked a ripple of kindness, growing bigger every day. It was a reminder that respect and compassion are the most valuable things we can give, and that sometimes the strongest voices are the quietest ones. Keanu Reeves never talked about what happened in that boutique. He did not give interviews or post on social media about the incident. For him, it was just a quiet moment in his life. But what he did that day left a deep mark on many people. After the story spread everywhere, some fans sent him letters and messages thanking him for his kindness. They told him how his calm and gentle way had inspired them to be better to others. Even strangers who never met him said they learned a lesson about respect and humility. Keanu read some of these messages quietly, and he smiled softly. In his daily life, Keanu continued to live simply. He took public transportation without fuss. He bought meals for homeless people. He gave money quietly to hospitals and charities. But he never made a big deal about these acts. He believed kindness did not need a spotlight. It was something done with the heart, not for praise. The boutique where he had been also changed deeply. The manager worked hard to make sure every customer felt welcome. They trained the staff not only to sell clothes, but to treat everyone with respect. Clara, the saleswoman who had laughed, had become one of the kindest people in the store. She shared her story openly to remind others that anyone can change, that no matter past mistakes, we can all learn to be better. Many customers came back, not just for the clothes, but because they felt a new warmth inside the store. It was no longer just a place of fashion, but a place where kindness mattered. The story of Keanu's visit became a symbol of hope, showing how one small act of grace can ripple out and touch many lives. Far from the spotlight, Keanu kept walking quietly through the world, but his actions echoed loudly in the hearts of those who heard the story. It was a reminder that respect, kindness, and humility are the greatest gifts we can give to others. That sometimes true power is found in gentleness, and true strength is shown in grace. And so, life went on, changed quietly by a simple moment in a busy store. A moment when a man chosen by millions chose to teach with silence, to forgive with patience, and to lead by example. The world needed that lesson, and thanks to him, it remembered. The lesson stayed with Clara, with the staff, with every customer, and with all who watched, that no matter where we come from or how we look, every person deserves kindness. And the greatest leaders are those who show love when it is easiest to judge. Keanu Reeves walked away that day without a word, but what he left behind was louder than any speech. It was a message for the world, one of hope, compassion, and the quiet power of being human.